Okay, I think we're here. Welcome back, everybody, to my Friday live stream. Going to be starting a new painting today. I've already done this abstract background on this canvas. I do this sometimes just to the same purpose of defeating the white canvas that I do, like when I just put a wash on it, but now I have some sort of texture and patterns to go with. So let me hold on a second. There we go. All right, sorry about that. I'm getting some feedback there. So this is the sketch that I'm going on. So you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to put that on this canvas. I might end up putting some of the band members in there. This is a painting of, I'm going to be painting of Charles Bradley, who was known as the Screaming Eagle of Soul. If you're not familiar, look him up on YouTube. It's awesome music. So as I do that, I'm going to continue to talk about my story, stories, or whatever it is. How I got started. I've talked about it for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Getting started with coming out to California, trying to get into the animation industry originally. Not being able to get hired in the animation industry because of it being in a sort of transitioned into digital world, and there wasn't a lot of jobs, and for whatever reason, I had a difficulty getting anywhere with that. And so I started selling my art in the street in Venice, part-time. Well, started out part-time as I had another part-time job at Macy's. You know, at some point maybe I'll quit recapping everything every week, but just so everybody knows what was going on. Yeah, I worked at Macy's, seasonal help, it's part-time work. I need some extra cash. Saw people selling their art in the boardwalk in Venice Beach. Decided I would take a stab at that myself, and eventually made more money at Macy's. I quit my job at Macy's. I'm going to try this different. Then I started selling my work full time, basically in the street, and worked my way up from there, so to speak, like starting on the ground on the blanket to, you know, eventually selling to galleries all over the world at one point. But most of that was just trial and error. So everything I did was just taking what I had at the time and trying to make it work. So whatever you have at the time, whatever you have as your resources, you know, I think everybody's kind of dealt a certain hand of cards in life, and you just start where you're at with what you got, and you do the best you can. And so that's what I was going to do. Yeah, so I you know, the thing about the story is, like, I feel like I didn't have much, but I actually had quite a bit going for me. I had, first of all, the ability to come to a city that was big enough to support artists. You know, I didn't live in a little town in Wyoming that I grew up in with 150 people anymore. I had a car, had my art supplies. I had a portfolio of art. I had $1,900 in my pocket when I got to LA, which maybe sounds like a lot to some people, but it weren't much to me at the time, considering that I couldn't find a job, and because I didn't have a place to live, and I couldn't find a place to live because I didn't have a job. And those two things work against each other. And it was you know, like, I've never been homeless, or, you know, like, my opinions of homeless people were, I don't know what they were when I was in college. That's the first time I ever had experience seeing homelessness was when I was in Columbus, Ohio. But the first time I ever felt the possibility of it was when I was in LA. And it's really easy to get in the fuck barrel All it takes is a few mistakes, and you don't have any money and don't have a way to do anything. So I could see that the what kind of led me to that experience was the trying to get a job when I didn't have a place to live. And so I was applying for jobs, and I didn't have an address to put down anywhere, didn't have a phone number, trying to get a job, trying to get a place to live when you don't have a job or a phone number or anything else. And so, so I could see that if I ran out of my $1,900, I would literally be on the street. So the thing I did have going for me was my family is supportive, and I don't think that they would have let me be on the street. But I could imagine a situation where you don't have a family to back you up, and you end up in that situation. And once you're in the street, good luck getting a job. You don't have a place to shower anymore. So what I was doing is I was living in a hotel by the week. It was like a couple $100 a week at this shitty hotel in Glendale called the Bell Motel. It's not even there anymore. And I was in a race in time to get some sort of job before I couldn't afford to live in that hotel anymore, that I'd be in my car. I did have camping gear because when I came out to California, I came out with my roommate from college, and we camped out along the way. So I had camping gear. I don't, what I was going to go camp in the forest somewhere. I don't know. I mean, I had that. So I was fortunate enough to, to be able to, like I said, had a family, and my parents co-signed a lease so I could get an apartment. And then I was able to find a job at Macy's folding shirts for seasonal help, $6.75 an hour. It wasn't enough to pay rent. And by the time I got to that point, I was flat broke. And so I had my portfolio and my art and my supplies and stuff, and a place to get some money, but it wasn't enough to keep up with the rent or the utilities or anything like that. It was just, I don't know. I had this delusion, I think, that it wouldn't take me long to get a job and get hired in the profession I was there to get hired in. So I think that hope or this sort of optimism kept me going, and it was more delusion that I look back at it now than anything else. Like, I had no idea what I was up against, and I don't think we all really ever do. But back to the idea of like seeing my attitude towards homelessness really changed with that experience. Like, I saw how easy it could be to end up in the street, even if you weren't doing anything that people think that maybe homeless people deserve to be in the street because they're drug addicts or they're this or they might have a lot of judgments. But it doesn't. All it really takes is losing your job and not having anybody to support you or to back you up or help you, and you're screwed. And then you're in, like I said, you're in the fuck barrel, and it's harder to get out of that than it is to make $10,000. I could see that, and that's you don't want to be there. And yeah, so like it changed the way I perceived homelessness for sure. Because when you have an experience when you're that close to it, makes you fortunate for what you have and a little more compassionate for people who don't have it as good as you do. That being said, we're all dealt the hands we're dealt, and we have what we have, and you got to do the best with what you got. So, yeah. So anyway, I was working at Macy's, like I said. So I started selling my art on the boardwalk, and I've gone over that in the last few weeks. So I try not to go on too much about that. But let me see here. Let me adjust my references. See what I'm doing. And so the thing that went on for me down there was there's an evolution of improvements, and of course, the more resources you have, the quicker you can make those improvements to uh, whatever it is that you're doing. Like if you have money to put into something, money basically is a measurement of economic energy. It's so like if you have the money to put into like you know buying a big vehicle and traveling all over the country right away, or renting a retail space and signing like if you have all those things, then it gives you a lot of not really an advantage so much as it gives you the ability to move quicker. Because basically, what we're fighting against at any given time is just like entropy and the unraveling of things. Like if you don't put energy into things, they're going to fall apart. Um, so I had a so I took my art down the street, sold it, and as I made money, the thing that I did was I constantly was putting more the money that I was making, I was reinvesting it back into what I was doing. So the first things that happened was making a better display. The other things that I started realizing is like I was making money on prints and I was spending a lot of money at Kinko. So I got a computer that I was able to get a loan from Apple at the time to get a Mac computer, a scanner, and a printer. Cut Kinko's out of loop. So the short-term expense was a lot higher, but I was making enough on the boardwalk that I thought I can probably afford the monthly payment on this thing. And the point of that is that if you're going to go into debt uh, for your job or your career or education, it's never a bad thing to spend money on things that make you money or that improve what you're doing. Like going into debt to buy materials, like buy canvas or to buy uh, um, I'm just thinking here, to buy like tools, all that sort of stuff. I would say that that's always a good idea. You're going to get something if what you're spending money on, and as far as like if you're going to use a credit card, the things that you're spending money on make you more money than the interest on that debt. Then it's probably the right choice. So don't be too nervous about going into debt for that. I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, but I found that's always been beneficial to keep investing in what you're doing. Like I didn't buy clothes. I still will buy more in oil paint and paintbrushes and canvas than I will in buying new clothes. So I prioritized my creative endeavors over almost anything else. And you want to invest in yourself. So whatever money you are making, you got to put that back into what you're doing, unless you're happy just staying where you're at. And if you're happy being where you're at, getting what you're getting, and just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're not, you got to invest into yourself. Uh, and I understand that can get difficult too if what you're doing isn't working, and then you run out of resources. So it's a gamble in any sense of the word. That what you're doing is going to pay off. But if it does start paying off, you have to put some of that energy back into it. For a couple of reasons. One, nothing stays the same. So whatever success you do find, it will run its course. The environment will change. Uh, you will change. Something will happen, and if you just rely on what you're doing to be continuous and going on, uh, I would say that's not a very very wise idea. So that goes to the idea that I was talking about like last week or the week before about getting out before you're pushed out. An example of that was Venice Beach. Started out as fun. It was a free resource that I had. The reason that we were allowed to set up there is because with the First Amendment, basically, it was set up as a place of free expression where you could set up and display your artwork. Um, and the environment changed. There was people who didn't want artists out there. They didn't want anybody out there who wasn't paying rent for a merchant space. There was residents that lived there that got tired of the people out there all the time making too much noise, and they just wanted to be in their, you know, condos and houses without hearing people rummage in the morning trying to set up a booth. And I guess I get that. um, yeah, so it turned into a grind. It turned, the city was changing the ordinances all the time. That's such a thing. But I want to kind of go back to the other sort of evolution of investing in myself. So I got a computer and a printer, and I was making my own prints, which were more profitable for me. I mean, I had more control over it. They were better quality, so it was just, for many reasons, it was just a better move. I think I'm getting really too caught up in getting this right, and anyway. Sorry, I'm just mumbling to myself here. I want to do more of a gestural thing, so I'm going to start getting a little looser with it. So one of the first things I started hearing was that I was like, I wish, I want something larger, because all I had was these 8.5 by 11-inch color prints, and people wanted something bigger than what I had to offer. And so the first thing I did was not the first thing. So how I responded is I went and bought a color printer that would allow me to make, like 11 by 17 size prints. And then I would have two sizes. And so part of this was listening to what people were telling me and what they wanted versus what I was offering. And so that seemed like a no-brainer. I just knew, like, if I had the ability to bring larger pieces, then I would probably do better. So you kind of, some part of it, you give people what they're asking for. So I didn't have any money, but I did have a credit card, which I had left over from college, and I had just enough money to buy that printer, and that printer was like $600. So I maxed out my credit card to get that printer, and I was like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but yes, like I was saying, investing in yourself is the right thing to do. And then that worked. I sold $20 prints. I don't remember how it like really increased my overall sales, but I had more than just one size of everything to offer to people, so they had a choice. The the funny thing is the next thing I heard was like, "Do you have bigger, even bigger?" They want, in fact, that wasn't big enough, and I realized that like, oh well, this is going to be a continuous theme here, and so I started looking into other printers, and there was large format printers from Epson, but they were like $3,000, and I did not have the money for that, and I remember thinking, it's like, if I could get people to pre-order stuff, and maybe I could get a bunch of that and get the money up front. I was trying to figure out, how can I get this how can I get the money to get this printer? And it's like, I know if I got it, it would pay for itself. I just knew it. And I didn't have the money. This is before Kickstarter or GoFundMe or anything like that. And so I remembered while I was on the boardwalk that I had been approached to do this job that I didn't want to do. It was for this like startup greeting card company, and it's just a project I didn't want to do. Like, for a couple of reasons. One, what they wanted, I didn't see how I could turn that into anything I could sell as far as prints were concerned. don't like that. Let me reach changes. And and he approached me a couple of times. I turned him down. It's like, oh, we're gonna offer. They offered like was it $800 or something like that, or $600, whatever. And while I was trying to figure out like how I could get the money for this printer, I realized like he had mentioned something about maybe doing several pieces. Like maybe they'll. So a lot of times when people offer you a project, they try to make it sound better than it is by giving you the idea that there'll be more work for you in the future, or we'll hire you again. It's like we're just gonna be a lot of projects. And so I decided to get a hold of this guy and basically say, look, I would be interested to do this, but you need to hire me to do 6 of them or something like that. And that 6 of them, I was aiming, I think it was, I wanted $3,200, and I was aiming for 4 of them at $800. And he came back with, if you do 6 of them for $500 a piece, it's a deal. So I said, all right, it's a deal. So I went and got my deposit from him. It was $1,500. And then I got a hold of my parents, which, like I said, was one of the resources I had, luckily, and asked them if I could borrow $1,500 with the idea that I would pay them back after I completed this job. I got the money back from the job. So they agreed. And the first thing I did was I went out and bought the printer. I got the deposit, got the money from my parents, went out and bought that $3,000 printer, and just started selling prints right away. And it did. It paid for itself within a month or two of selling prints, not only on the boardwalk, but other festivals and stuff. And as soon as I got the job finished, I got the money for it, paid my parents back, and it worked. So I just did something I really didn't want to do to get something I wanted. And there's a number of situations where that's come up, where the key to doing or getting somewhere is going and doing the thing that you don't want to do. Going exactly the thing, like the most direct path to your goal is going through something you don't want. Like even doing these live streams is something like I'm unsure of. Like, I don't know how people are going to respond to this, if this is going to, come back to bite me in the ass somehow. Like, I'll say something stupid, or, you never know what these things are going to bring. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with this, but anyway, so, I'm going to try to get to my story about New York here through all this. I'm leading up to that, but I wanted to go through sort of the evolutionary process of how, like what led up to the idea of New York might be a good idea. This. So I'm drawing hands. The hands are more of a design. You don't want to like to cut up and drawing just a weird palm with a bunch of sausages sticking out of it. So trying to avoid that situation, but we'll see what happens. And trying to talk and do all this at the same time is difficult, so I might end up having to go back and fix this. Anyway, I still don't like that. Dang it. All right, let me continue to figure this out. So I was continuously upgrading and updating anything that I could had to do with selling my art. Like last week I had mentioned about like I was trying to do illustration work and do still trying to get into animation studios, when I realized that what was really working was selling my art as art in the street and at little street festivals and stuff. And so I started to focus all of my energy into what was working instead of trying to do what I thought was going to, I guess, I had to reassess what my goals were. And I kind of realized that working in the animation industry wasn't something I really cared about. And that's probably why I never got into it, because I didn't really care about the animation industry that much. As much as I did, I just wanted to work as an artist, and I didn't know that you could just sell your art. That was not an option that had ever even occurred to me. with the way that I was raised and the ideas about, you go get a job and that kind of stuff. So that didn't even occur to me until somehow started doing it out of pure dumb luck. Like I just happened into the way I was doing it. And it worked. It's like I didn't have a plan of coming out to Los Angeles to sell my art in the street. Like that would have, if somebody told me like that's what you need to go do, I would have said, yeah, you're full of shit. That sounds like a stupid idea, and it might be a stupid idea, but because it wasn't my plan, it didn't occur to me as a like something I was trying to make happen. And getting back to my point, the main goal I realized was to make a living as an artist, and I was doing it that way, albeit it wasn't the way I had envisioned it or planned. It was nonetheless, it was still the way it was working, and so I decided I would rather do that than work at a job I didn't like or that I felt was unfulfilling in some way. I think there was if I so we start looking at the situations through the lens of luck. I was lucky that Macy's only paid $6.75 an hour. I guess you could say that. If they paid more and I had benefits, it would have been a lot harder to quit that job to go sell my art on a sidewalk that had no benefits. It wasn't necessarily a glamorous way to do it. Like I said, the people I worked with laughed at me. So it made it easier to quit a job I didn't like, for sure. But I don't know, the fact that it didn't pay anything. It's to say that's luck. I don't know. I think luck is basically a way of describing things that happen that have already happened. It's not really a predictor of anything, and I wouldn't rely on it as a business plan. Like even if you get struck by lightning, you have to go outside. I mean, if you got struck by lightning while sitting on your couch watching Gilmore Girls, that would be luck. It would, like luck is a thing that it's a way of talking more than anything else. And I think it can be used to justify ourselves into not doing something, like, or explaining why somebody else has done something and you haven't been able to do it is because they're lucky and you're not. There is some chance in, being born in the right country and having a supportive family, all that kind of stuff that, that could be considered luck. So could, you were the right sperm to penetrate the egg. I mean, is that luck too? Like, so the question becomes like, where does this idea of luck begin and end? Was it, it didn't seem like luck when I couldn't find a job in LA and I couldn't get a job other than Macy's. That seemed like bad luck. But in hindsight, I'm glad it happened that way. And so maybe it was good luck. It didn't feel like luck when I couldn't get hired at animation studios. It didn't feel like luck when I was on the street selling my art. It was like just something I had to do. It was, I mean, nobody was forcing me, of course. It was something I chose to do. But, I was lucky there was a venue that I saw in Venice that I actually occurred to me to do. It's like all these things. And so you have to start asking yourself, like, so where does this begin? And it's kind of like, where does left and right begin? You understand the difference between right and left, like in direction or east and west, but you can't measure where it stops and starts. It it's just a way of thinking. It's that's all it really is. And so I think the point of that is if you're relying on luck, then it it's not something to rely on. I guess that's the point. But we can often think that something we're not getting somewhere because we're not having the right luck, or somebody else achieved because they're lucky. Um, and I think that's just a psychological trap that's easy to fall into if you're not careful. Um, you're no more lucky or less lucky than anybody else, in a grand scheme of things. I mean, we're all born, we're all going to die. Nobody's getting out of that nonsense. This hand is looking stupid, but this stuff keeps running. All right. Running into all kinds of dumb problems with this. So, I can look at, what I've done in my life or what I've done in my career, and I can see all the instances where things worked out to my advantage, uh, things that I could have no way predicted or controlled for. Um, and I think maybe that's what we mean when we say that something is, a lot of it's luck, is that um, you something happens and works to your benefit that you didn't earn or control in any way, and it was there, it happened. And in that sense, I understand that I can understand that idea. Um, but as the getting struck by lightning example, you have to be putting yourself in a position at some point for that luck to manifest itself. Um, and not doing something because uh, you know when you, or explaining away why you can't accomplish something because you don't have a X, Y, or Z at your disposal. Like you're not fortunate enough to have uh, a car or any whatever it might be. Could you're in the wrong social class. Uh, you have too many responsibilities. You have whatever it is. We tend to rationalize these things to ourselves so that we don't have to really do anything, or that we don't have to confront that we could be doing something. Uh, we defeat ourselves, and people who aren't defeated, we rationalize that they were lucky as a way of explaining other people's success, other people's accomplishments, um, or as a way of explaining your own. Like, because I look back at what I did, and I was like, I don't know how I did it exactly. I talk about these things, but I don't know why they worked for me. Like, I don't offer any of this stuff as a sort of how to. Um, things are different now. There's different resources available. Like, I don't know what I would do if I was just starting out exactly, but there are some principles that continue through the whole thing. Putting it in front of people, putting a price tag on it, investing in yourself, all those sort of things apply no matter what level you're at, I believe. Um, so there's maybe some fundamental principles of things that you can think about doing, but luck isn't something that you can use as or rely on, or like, well, I guess nobody's going to stop you from relying on it, but pardon the pun, good luck with that. um, Yeah. So in my opinion, luck is a way of thinking. It's a way of describing the past, but it's not something that you can put in your business plan. Um, you're going to need some sort of luck to happen while you're in action. Maybe luck is more like inspiration, in the sense that if you sit around waiting for it, you're never going to find it. It generally finds you busy and in the middle of doing something, and you're inspired to do something different, or do something that works better. You start finding improvements, things that you can improve in what you're doing, all that sort of stuff, or whatever it might be. And yeah, so I don't view luck as a business plan. And the more you're putting yourself out there, the more luck has an opportunity to work in your favor, or the more you have an opportunity to find it. But the first thing you got to do is something. There's lots of catchphrases. Luck favors the bold. I think I heard my friend Chet said that, or said, no, he didn't say it, but he was mentioning it to me one time. I said that earlier today, I think. I know another artist that said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. I don't know that hard work has much to do with anything, to be honest with you. Uh, it, I mean, you can work really hard at something and still fail, and likely will fail on some level. Um, so, speaking of failure, let me get back to some of my other story. Um, so, I was continuing to sell my art in the street, and I knew people were doing festivals, like art festivals and street festivals. I had found a couple of street festivals, and the thing about them is you had to pay a booth fee, which weeds out a lot of the riffraff that you might get in Venice Beach, who aren't willing. They just, like, there's a lot of people just would refuse to spend money. It's like, why would I spend money on somewhere when this is always free? And that was, he's like, yeah, there's a lot of inherent problems with free, and I'll get into that some other time. Feel like my sketch was way better. I hate when that happens. All right, let me get sidetracked too much. Yeah, so let's see, where was that? So the other thing that there's a lot of things that were going on all at the same time as I was doing the thing in Venice. I remember I ran into somebody who wanted some art lessons or some sort of help with flesh tones, and so I met with her at one point at like a community college, and I was trying to help her out. And then she wanted to paint more, and she wanted to know if I wanted like a painting friend. I'm like, all right. So she came over to my apartment where my studio was, and we would paint together. And this was a huge benefit to me, because up until this point, I wasn't producing a lot. I was so busy and trying to sell the art that I wasn't really making it a whole lot. And we were painting in my little one-bedroom apartment. We realized, like, there's not a lot of room here, and this would be way better if we, got a studio. So we decided that we would split an outside studio, and I was able to find one in Culver City we got one for like $450 a month or something. And so I went out of my one-bedroom apartment into a space that was dedicated to working. And there's something about that really put a fire under my ass to really make a lot more paintings. And that's what I did. But the funny thing is that after a couple months, she bailed on the studio, and I was left with it. And it was really nerve-wracking because I didn't think I could afford it. but I decided to see if I could hold on to it for as long as I could. And what happened is that because I was paying for that space, I found a way. I made more art, made more sales because I had more to sell, and it paid for itself. And I was able to keep it even without her splitting it with me. And as I started to learn to spend money on my art and invest in what I was doing, part of that was doing festivals. And some of these street festivals were like, $100 for a booth or something. But the one that I wanted to try there was one in Beverly Hills called the Affair in the Gardens, and I decided I would try to get into that. And it was a juried art festival, which meant that you had to send slides in and get accepted, and through a jury process. And so I did that, and I got in 2004. I got into the Beverly Hills Art Festival, and once again, I decided, it's like, all right, this is like a big show. I knew that. And so I went and I spent money on framing, and I traded a painting to the framer that I had. I sent him a lot of business from the boardwalk. He's a framer in Venice Beach. And so they were aware of my work and they liked it. And he decided that he would give me a deal on the framing and trade for the painting. So I was able to get a lot more framed than I would have otherwise get framed, and in exchange for an original painting. And I just said, with the caveat that I wanted to be able to show it in my booth, and I'll just put a marked sold on it. And so I spent money on the framing. Forgot to mention, one of the other things I figured out how to do is, like, early on I was able to accept credit cards, right? So one of the pushbacks I got in the sales in the street was like, oh, they didn't have, all they had was credit cards or a debit card. They didn't want to go to the ATM because they didn't trust it there on the beach. And so I figured out how to get a wireless terminal so I could take their credit cards. And anyway, so that was another investment, which was a lot of money. And I remember that I ordered it, and I sold a painting on the boardwalk of a mermaid, a fantasy painting I did, which is like one of my most popular paintings I ever did while I was out there. And anyway, I sold that painting, ordered that credit card terminal, which was like $1,000, so I could take payments from everybody. And I remember calling the company to get an update on the tracking, and they were a company in Boston. And I called them up one morning, and they're like, we're closed today due to the bombings in New York. I'm like, what the hell is this about? I turned on the news, and there was the mayor of LA was giving a press conference, and they're telling everybody to be calm and stay home. I'm like, what the hell? And it turned out that was 9/11. So I got I was trying to order my credit card machine in the same time that 9/11 happened. And I remember going out to the boardwalk. I was like, I didn't even know what to do after that happened. I went out to the board. I was like, the only thing I figured to do is just do what you do. And so I went out to the boardwalk. I didn't even care. I was like, cares if I sell anything? And it was actually a good weekend out there for me. We had an earthquake out there while I was signing a print, a major, like 3-point something earthquake at the same time. Like, imagine if New York and LA had both been in that. Imagine we had a huge earthquake, and that would have been crazy. Anyway, where was I going with this? I'll get back to it in a second. Yeah, so I was constantly evolving my way of selling art, producing art. I got into a studio space. I was starting to make a lot more art. I got accepted into this festival in Beverly Hills, and I made $10,000 that show, which for me was a huge amount of money. It was like mind-boggling. Like, the most I would make on the boardwalk was probably $300 in a day, and I sold almost everything I had in my booth. And then I knew, it was like, that's it. I discovered the ticket. I have to get into festivals. like these art festivals, I'll be making money. It's like, I was such a fool. I was like, of course. And so I started applying to all the other art festivals that are around LA, and anywhere I could drive to in a day or so, you know, and yeah, so that was the plan that I'm thinking here. And so I started spending money on framing and doing these things, and I started showing these other shows, and it wasn't the same. It wasn't, they weren't all doing that kind of money, that, not even close. But it gave me some confidence. Like, I knew it was possible. Like, I don't know exactly why, like, I would do other festivals that were juried art festivals and come nowhere close to that. But I was continuing to pursue, like, making more paintings, making them presented better. I remember going to shows and seeing other artists that were selling really well. And there was a tendency to, when I talked to other artists, that they would complain about people that were doing well, like they were a sellout somehow by what they were doing. They were just doing something that was gimmicky, or any number of things. And it occurred to me that they were doing something that's working, even if I didn't like their art, or I thought that they weren't very good, or whatever, you know, complaint I had about their success. And so I decided that I wouldn't just sit around and complain about why they're successful and I'm struggling. And I started to look at, what are they doing? And I remember walking into this one photographer's booth, and it was kind of photography, digital art. It was actually pretty cool stuff. And I looked at his presentation. He had like these 9-foot display walls, and really nice framing on everything. And it dawned on me, I was like, man, this looks like something. It looks expensive. It looks great. The presentation, I started picturing my art in those frames instead of that person's art. And I was like, what kind of impact would that have if I had this same sort of presentation and presence? And it occurred to me, I was like, oh, that's where I got to spend some of my effort, is into improving my presentation. If you're going to sell pieces that are thousands of dollars, or more than just $10 prints, you have to present it as being worth more than that to begin with. So if you have a $10 presentation, I wouldn't expect to sell more than $10 art. That can cut both ways too. If you have $1,000 paintings and you present it like $10 art, you're going to have a hard time selling $1,000 paintings. If people respond to the way you present your work, and they put value on what you're doing based on the value you put on it and the way you treat your own work. So treat your own work as if it's worth what you think it's worth. In fact, treat it like it's worth more than you think it's worth. Because if you don't do it, nobody's gonna like offer you to. They're gonna believe what you present to them. There's the idea, like, if you throw a brick hard enough, it will fly. And so even if your work isn't really very commercial, or when you see work that's just sort of really gimmicky and cheesy, or however you want to describe it, but it sells well, it's because they have the understanding of how to sell something. They know how to put enough force behind things to overcome the limitations or quality of what they're presenting. So the good news is that if you don't think that you have the talent, that doesn't really matter as much as you think it does. Um, talent is another thing like luck. It's really arbitrary and um, up for debate. Whatever you know, as far as like where that will take you. Um, having skill sets and talent definitely better than not having it, but it it isn't going to prevent you completely from doing what you want to do. So you don't have to worry that you're not the best at something or that you're not better than the next artist that you know. It's just you got you don't have to be better than that than everybody else. Mostly what you have to do is just be open for business. You have to put it in front of people. It's people will decide how much they care about the talent you have. I feel like I'm going all back and forth on these ideas. Oh, well, screw it. All right. Eh, don't know about this painting yet. I feel like the gesture's missing a bit. But so the whole experience with this festival in Beverly Hills, it gave me the notion that there's money. Like I could be making more money. I could be doing more. That I could maybe get into like I don't know, the whole idea of getting into galleries. I remember last week I mentioned the ideas. I saw this Lamborghinis pull up to a light stop, and I imagined what it would take to buy a Lamborghini by selling my art somehow. And I came to the conclusion that I had to get out of a tent, and that I needed multiple locations selling my art at the same time, only because of the limitation of all these festivals require you to be the artist at the booth selling your own artwork. And so you can't franchise yourself into all these art festivals because they don't allow it. And I learned early on from my experience in Venice that you can spend time fighting the situation. So like when Venice was changing its rule set, trying to basically they were trying to make it harder to just vend merchandise on the boardwalk. But in doing that, they made it actually just more difficult to be an artist out there. So what they did is they started um, this ties into the 9/11 stuff, actually. So after 9/11, we have a little thing called the Patriot Act come into play. And what they did with that is it allowed the city to do a lot more regulation of uh, free speech space. So under the Constitution, you're allowed to be in the public square uh, and have your say, whatever it is. Um, but now we have terrorism we got to deal with. So basically, that allowed local governments to take the space and put it out of the public view. They could do whatever they want to with it. So the reason they were doing that is they have people protesting, George Bush at the time, and they didn't want the protesters causing a scene for them. So they would put them around the corner somewhere where nobody could see them and say, well, there's your First Amendment space. And when it comes to the First Amendment or any amendment for that matter, that there isn't an absolute, like it's just doesn't come with any sort of boundaries. And the government will regulate those amendments the way they see fit. And the Patriot Act allowed them to really do a lot of things. And so the city, when it came to the Venice Beach situation, was taking advantage of that, well, in my opinion anyway, to curtail or regulate how that space on the boardwalk was being used under the First Amendment idea. So what they did is they decided that they would adopt a system where they marked off spaces on the boardwalk and institute a lottery system. So you then had to join a Parks and Recreation program, and they took the entire boardwalk and they turned what was enough space for 200 people or artists to be out there, and they marked it off into about 125 spaces. They also made rules about all kinds of things, like you could only have a display that was less than 4 feet tall, and you couldn't go outside of this space. And if you had violations, you would get tickets and warning, all kinds of things. There was so they instituted that. I joined it because I still had to be out there. And the first time they had the lottery drawing, which they had on a Tuesday, and a lot of people that were out there on the boardwalk on the weekends, they also worked other jobs, and they couldn't always be there for the lottery poll for the boardwalk. So your ability to exercise your First Amendment really came down to whether you could make it to these lotteries for the spaces. The other thing that happened that was going on was that there was some other people that had large family operations that were selling different things. And so they would have 20 or 30 people there as part of the lottery. They would get a whole bunch of spaces that they only needed like 10 of them, and then they would give some of those spaces to their friends, or they would sell them off to other people who wanted them. It was like, it was a pain in the ass. So the first time I joined that, first thing that happened was I didn't get a space. Like for the first 2 weeks, I was just cut out. And so I decided that I was going to fight that, and I went out there anyways, and I got citations. They had some exceptions, like if a space wasn't occupied by like noon, then you could occupy it. And so what happened after the lottery is that people got a secured spot and they stopped getting out there so early. So the idea was to create less of a hassle for people that live there, because now there wasn't such a competition for the space, that people were showing up at normal times, and that sort of thing. So in that sense, it was working for what they wanted it to, but what it was doing is it was really preventing a lot of people from being able to be out there at all, and I was one of them. So I showed up one day, and it was like just at the crack of noon when the spaces opened up, and I got into a space, and about 30 minutes later, this person showed up, and she's like, "That's my space." I'm like, "Well, you weren't here in time." And she was complaining to me, and she didn't even have the proper permit badge you're supposed to wear, like a lanyard around your neck. So I said, "All right, well, call the Recs and Parks Department and see what they have," because I was going by the rules. And the Recs and Parks Department came up and they said, "Well, you have to leave." And I said, "Well, this person wasn't here in time, and I'm here and I'm already set up." And so I just told them, "We'll call the police, because I'm not leaving." They called the police. The police showed up and put me in handcuffs and told me if I didn't move, that they were going to arrest me and throw me in jail for the weekend. And even if I was right, it wouldn't matter because I wouldn't get my stuff. It would be locked up as evidence. And, they didn't care whether I was breaking the law or if I was in the right. It was just basically a power move by them. And so I decided I was there to make a living with my art, not go to jail over space on the boardwalk. That wasn't going to do me any good at all. So I moved. So all that to say is, like, I started to see, like, so one of the things that let me back up. So the way that ordinance worked was you had the Parks and Recs run it, the police enforced it, but the way the law was written is that it only pertained to the space that they marked on the sidewalk. They had regulation over that. And so I quickly figured out that they didn't have any authority or enforcement authority over anything else that was going on there, over any other space. And there's plenty of spaces between these spaces, in front of bike racks and all kinds of. So I started just setting up outside of this. I stopped going to the lottery. I just started setting up. My goal was to get the 3 citations, get a ticket, and force them to prosecute me in court so I could fight them. I got the 3 citations probably in one weekend. I got a, you know, before I got a ticket, I got a call from somebody at the city. I don't know if it was the city Venice attorney or something, and she didn't. She just wanted me to just do what the lottery was. She didn't. She didn't want to give me a ticket. And I said, "You're going to have to give me a ticket." And she was like, They weren't going to do that, and they weren't going to enforce the citations. And so then I realized they aren't going to enforce this, and I started just doing whatever I felt like doing. I sold my art in any space I could find down there that was not inside their marked off spots. And while everybody else was playing along with this game, I was doing whatever I felt like doing and getting away with it. And they would get upset at each other, and they'd call the parks would get, but the park, they never did anything to me because I was not working within their little system. It's just a loophole that I'd found. So all that to say is like, so I kind of figured like, this is stupid. I got to get out of here. I could spend, all this time and energy fighting for my rights, my First Amendment rights, and getting upset about like my rights are being violated, and they were. But I also was having these experiences where I was going to some place, I'd buy a booth, I would just go through a system that was working, and I didn't have all the hassle of, trying to fight this city on principle all the time about something like. And I decided that my goal was to focus on making a living with my art, not fighting civil rights campaign. That wasn't what I wanted to spend my time with. Even though I felt that there was plenty of people that were doing similar things, and I decided that I would let them fight that fight, and I would just move on. I'm not going to sit around and get into all kinds of arguments with the city when, I'm not a civil rights activist. That's not what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided that the best thing to do was to move on. And part of that was like, I would rather be able to afford space to vend somewhere. It was just more, it was more respectful to yourself in a lot of ways. You're not having to fight over space on a sidewalk. It just seemed that was sort of a dead end to me. I know it's at an hour, but I'm going to continue on for a bit. I'm going to talk about stuff in New York too. I keep on talking, keep on teasing about it, and then never getting to it. So on to this New York thing. So the New York Art Expo was a place, was a trade show basically that would have a lot of galleries, publishers, all kinds of opportunities for artists to show, would show up there. So galleries that were looking for art, for new artists, publishing agencies and companies that were looking for new artists and, outlets to sell their things that they were publishing. All that stuff happened in New York. And I had known some artists that had done this show in New York and found some success there, found publishing deals, that sort of stuff. So I thought, I just got to get there. I remember this show I did in Beverly Hills where I killed it. I knew it was possible to do that. All I had to do was get there. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I had this high amount of confidence that something good would come out of it. And what I was saying about confidence and delusion. Yeah. All right. Starting to kind of look cool. So I again started investing everything I had into it. I had to get framing. I had to get stuff freight shipped up to New York. I had the booth. So I was just going to do an artist booth there at first, which was like, a couple grand, which was a lot of money. But I thought, it's like, I need more space. That was like only like a 5 by 10 foot space. Like I need more space. than that. So I decided to get the full on booth on the main floor, which was $5,000 for one space. And I went back to my parents again and borrowed some money from them. You know, having borrowed money from them, paid them back before. And I spent all kinds of, I guess, to sum it up, by the time I got to New York, I had $12,000 invested in just this one space for several days. And when I got there, I had maxed out my credit cards. I had everything I had was in this, and it was nerve wracking. But you know, I've made bets on myself before, and they've kind of paid off. So I was hopeful and excited and all that stuff, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And what happened was, I didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, I kind of did, but um, I just wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready for this because I didn't have some of the fundamental understandings about how that business is going to work. So I was used to selling my art to the general public, and the general public's buying preferences aren't the same as a publisher or a gallery. They want something that they understand. And I still had fantasies. I had all kinds of different techniques and styles and subject matters, and I didn't really have a thing. And so I ended up making almost zero money at that show. I think I made more money selling my art in Venice Beach the weekend before I went to New York than I did in New York. Like, I zeroed on the first several days, which I hadn't had happen to me before. You know, even when I was selling on Venice, I never went home. Only one time I ever went home without making at least one $10 sale. But I zeroed, and by the end of the show, I think I did like $1,200, maybe. And I didn't have enough money to my name to even ship the work back to me. So what I did is I got as much of it out of. I had some paper prints and different things. I got before I packed up my show in New York. I got as much as I could into out of the sleeves and into my suitcase. Like I carried as much of it as I could home on the airplane, and I went down to Venice Beach the very next weekend to start trying to dig my way back out of this situation. Like, I didn't have enough money to pay my rent was due. Didn't have enough money for that. I had to borrow money from my friend Jay to pay that. My credit cards were due. I didn't have any money for that. My cell phone got shut off because I didn't have money to pay for that. The studio that I was renting, I had to borrow $300 from them to cover the check I wrote to them until I got back from the boardwalk that weekend so I could pay them back. I think I remember at one point I had $12 out of this, and you know, $12,000 of credit card debt, $5,000 I owed my parents, thousands I owed my friend. My parents were generally kind. They're like, they offered to help me out, and I refused to take any more money from them. I was like, I figured that you can't get out of a hole by digging more hole, and I just seemed like borrowing money to cover my rent, and it's like I could not stomach that anymore. So I called up my credit card companies I have money to, and my hat in hand is like, look, I can't pay you. What can we do here? And surprisingly enough, a lot of them were willing to work with you if you made some sort of agreement or attempt. You know, it's better than just not paying. I put my student loans back into deferment. I still had a little bit of deferment available to me. My credit card companies, what I did with them is they would shut off my credit card, not my credit card, my cell phone company. They shut off my cell phone, but you could still call them on your cell phone. And so I would make an arrangement with them where I would pay like $100 like right now, and I would pay the balance in 2 weeks or whatever it was, but in order to get my phone turned back on. But I knew I couldn't. I wasn't going to have the money in 2 weeks. But I just did that. They turned my phone on. 2 weeks went by. I didn't have the money to pay them. They turn it off again or whatever it was. I call them up. I would give them the same thing, and that went on until I was finally able to keep current with the cell phone bill. And by selling the art that I had on the boardwalk, um, I called the company that had freight shipped my work out to New York, and I told them I didn't have enough money to pay for it to get it back. So, but I was working on it, and they gave me a bit of time. And so one of the first things I had to do was get that work back. So I made a little bit of money. I called them up. I got that paid for to get my work shipped back to me. And when I got my inventory back, that was one thing that I realized, like, all right, so I had bankrupted myself. You know, I didn't file for bankruptcy, but I literally had bankrupted myself. I didn't have anything, but I did have inventory. So I wasn't completely destitute. In that sense, like capitalism kind of works in the advantage for artists, I think, because even if you don't have any inherent wealth from your family, or you don't own property, or you don't have money, if you can get to the point where you can make something, that becomes capital that you can then trade for money or services or other things. Anyways, that's a little sidebar. So I didn't have anything but my inventory, and so that's what I did. So in that sense, lucky for me, you know, like so even though I had spent all that money to get there, a lot of the money I'd spent was money on my products, like my art, the framing of my art, the printing expenses. So like I still had that. It was just tied up as inventory. And I slowly kind of just kept going to the beach, you know, and then the thing is like to make this thing run, you still have to put money into it. So I couldn't just like immediately start paying back all my creditors. I had to like pay for booth spaces at other shows and all these things. And I had to just, I remember my goal of leaving Venice was so like desperate to me. Like I was just having these daydreams of like not ever having to go back to Venice after this New York show. And then there I was going back to the thing that was such a pain in the ass to me, but was really a lifeline. This thing that I hated doing, or I was getting such a grind, but thank God it was there. Yeah, and like so, you know, yeah, I lost my ass in New York. The things that I learned there, there was a couple of takeaways I had. Like I said, I didn't have all this. I didn't have anything that was cohesive in my style or cohesive in technical. Like I didn't have a thing, and what I termed it then was I didn't have a gimmick. It seemed like the things that were really doing well were the things that had a shtick of some sort, and I didn't know. And I'm not saying that as a slight towards that. You know, like you know, my suspicion was like if you come up with a gimmick or shtick, then it's just that, you're going to get really sick of it. Because what I didn't want to do was come up with something like that I then had to do. Like, you know, I didn't want to be obligated to something like that, to something that I wasn't really truly interested in. But I knew I had to come up with something cohesive. But so how do you do that? And I still couldn't figure out how to. That goes back to the idea of figuring out what your style is. Like, that all happens really organically. if you try to force those things, they end up not working so well. They look contrived. They don't have, like, I didn't want to be stuck doing something I didn't like doing, and that's what I saw as the shtick or the gimmick. So I figured that the people that had those sort of things were, even though it might have been cheesy, some of it might have been really good. Um, I They must like doing that. So the conclusion I came to was that I have to have a thing that's my thing, and I don't know what that's going to be. I can't. I don't want to force it because I don't want it to. I don't. That's never worked for me in the past. So um, I just continued doing what I was doing at the moment. But I knew I had to have something that the galleries would be able to understand, because they weren't going, if they didn't understand it, they didn't know how to sell it, and basically they're only as good as you are at selling it. So they aren't going to come up with your branding and your, or whatever you want to call it. They aren't going to come up with a way to promote you. That's all on you. And to do that in a way that isn't contrived is uh, it's difficult. It's like trying to surprise yourself, or trying to be spontaneous on purpose. I don't know. It doesn't. Those things don't always jive very well together. Let's see. I really like my sketch better. Let me think about this for a second. But I did meet some people there. That there was a gallery in Louisiana that really liked my art, and spent some time talking to them, and they took a couple of my fantasy pieces on consignment. And the first weekend they had them, this was in 2005, and the first weekend that they had it in their gallery in New Orleans was the same weekend Katrina hit. And my artwork didn't get lost in Katrina, but the gallery pretty much had to rethink what it was doing, and it moved. That didn't really work out, unfortunately. So maybe I got a gallery. That's good luck. And then the gallery got hit by Katrina. It's bad luck. Like, just like somebody talking about it. It's like you can't predict anything with luck. And it's like, it's just, all right. Let's see. It's kind of cool. All right. Whatever. Um, yeah, I knew I needed to come up with my thing. And slowly but surely, I kind of climbed out of this financial hole I had put myself in. It took time, but eventually it came around. It's like, people will work with you. Um, well, in my experience, that's what it was. I can't guarantee that they're always going to, but I found that they will, when they would rather work with you than lose whatever money you do owe them, and that's what they were looking at. Like, all right. Yeah, so I learned an incredible amount there, that I had to have this thing, I had to have something better. I didn't have my canvas prints figured out then. That was a thing there, and I had the printers do, but I hadn't figured out how to make that work, and I couldn't figure it out. Um, the other thing I ended up doing is, like, I met somebody on the boardwalk who I became friends with, and he had a house up in Highland Park, and I was telling him, he came down to visit me one time, and we were talking, and he's like, "Well, I have this house, I'll rent it to you for cheap, So I was able to get out of the apartment I was in and move into his old house up in Highland Park for a pretty reduced rent. And basically the idea is that I would trade art for it occasionally. Like I would give him a painting every year or something as part of the deal. And so yeah, so there, even inside of all these things that seem like bad luck, there is good luck with inside of it. Other opportunities come up, and you end up adjusting in ways that you wouldn't have otherwise had to or thought of if you hadn't put yourself in a situation of being bankrupt. Yeah. Uh, so don't be afraid to invest in yourself. You can't rely on luck as a uh, business plan. Uh, Realize that even inside all these bad situations, or inside of some of these situations, there is good things that do come out of them. Uh, Whether it's the understanding of what's some real reality sets in on you, and don't be a these things are going to happen if and it's not just if you pursue being an artist. These things happen to everybody who is trying to accomplish something or trying to make something happen, and it's going to happen whether you do or not. Probably it's like, but there isn't some sort of boogeyman, or there isn't. Your problem isn't going to be, for the most part, some force that's working against you, whether it's some social status or the government. These things do work against you, but that's not your problem. Your problem is not adjusting to it. uh, well, I'm not saying that you have a problem, but what uh, you're going to be worse off if you don't try. You're not going to find as much luck if you're not out looking for it. You're trying to make it happen. Um, what the successes you do find may not be the way you envisioned them. Like, technically, I failed the pursuit of uh, landscape painting background, background painting for feature animation. Getting into that industry, I failed. I never succeeded at it, but it's because I didn't want it. That's not what I really wanted. Um, when you go out and do these things, got to be flexible. I mean, you don't have to, but it helps. And you don't have to even know what your main goal is to begin with. Like, you don't have to have it all figured out. What happens is that you get started on something, you get smacked with reality, what the situation really is, and then your desires kind of change. You might realize that what you were going after is something that it's not really what you wanted. And like I said, what I really wanted was to be an artist. And I wanted to make a living. I wanted to make artwork, whatever that looked like. And I didn't really care if it was in the animation industry or not. But the whole point of starting somewhere and pursuing it led me into all these other things. And I think the getting started part is probably the most important. You you can change your mind. You can change your mind anytime. You're not stuck, you know, barring you didn't become a paraplegic or some other outlandish thing that might have happened. You can change what you're doing anytime you want to. Like, I could quit working with galleries and just go be a hermit in the mountains somewhere if I wanted. Like, I could do that. I don't want to do that. But if you're not achieving the things that you would hope to achieve, it's okay. Um, but if you're not achieving them and then you're complaining because something is working against you, whether it's um, you have all these limitations, um, then you're defeating yourself. Really, you're going to have limitations. Everybody has limitations of some sort. Some people have way more limitations than others. Um, I don't know that it does any good to feel guilty about having, uh, not guilty, but like, like, if you have things that are advantageous for you, that doesn't mean that they're not worth something. That doesn't mean that you don't have to work hard. It doesn't mean that your things that you have accomplished are meaningless. It just means that you got dealt a different hand. Um, it also means that being aware of those things also is a good idea, I think. Having compassion for where people are at. People are in shitty situations, and a lot of times that isn't their fault. Sometimes it is, but having some compassion for where other people are at. It's and the other thing I really wanted to touch on before I stop here is, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So when I was doing all these things, there were people around that were buying my art and supporting me through all this. It might have just been the tourists walking by in the boardwalk for a weekend. It could have been people who bought my originals. It was my family. It was my friends. And I had all of this support. I didn't do anything completely on my own. And so you're going to rely on the people that you rely on. There's going to be people that help you along the way. Nobody goes solo. Everybody relies on other people's circumstances, that sort of thing. So, like, I don't feel like I would have been able to do any of this if I hadn't had the education system I had in Wyoming that had all kinds of art programs and art classes that they invested in. Like, I was very lucky to have all that stuff. I was always able to draw, and I had that gift or that knack for it without those art classes. But having an environment that fostered it and supported it was a huge, huge benefit. And I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without it. So, you know, if you, I guess that's to say is like, you, even if you do good things, you can't really take the credit for it completely. It's like, yes, you go out and put yourself out there and you do the work, but other people are supporting you. And that's the only real way that things happen. And, according to what, how I've experienced it. All right. It's about an hour and a half. I hope that was worth listening to. I kind of rambled on along there. I will see you guys next week. Tell your friends if you want to. Don't if you don't. I don't care. No, whatever. It's up to you guys. All right. I'll see you soon. Let's